Hey, 3DMJers, this is Andrea Valdez, and you're listening to the 3D Muscle Journey podcast. This is our 190th episode, and as we do every 10th episode, this is an audience-supplied Q&A session where we do the best to answer as many queries as possible within the best of our abilities. And today, I'll be doing the asking, and Alberto Nunez and Jeff Alberts will be doing the answering. A couple of questions from this episode came from the case study Q&A form on our website, which you can always find at 3dmusclejourney.com/QA. And the rest of them came from responses to our Instagram stories or posts. So if you don't follow us there, please do so. Our handle is at Team3DMJ. Topics covered in this show will include dietary decision-making, injury and volume, bodybuilding and hair loss, how to construct a posing routine, how to determine when you're ready to compete, gaining confidence as a coach, how to practice peak weeks, adolescent internet bodybuilding, and a whole bunch more. As always, if you have any feedback or comments on this episode, head over to 3dmusclejourney.com or our YouTube channel at youtube.com/team3dmj and leave it under podcast number 190. Let's go ahead and get into it. Here is Q&A session 19 with Jeff Alberts and Alberto Nunez. Okay, so I wanted to start with this one because it's the forever bodybuilder question, I feel like every athlete, but he asked it well. So this is Eric. You've probably heard this a million times, but I would sincerely appreciate your guidance. Simply put, bulk, cut, maintain, or recomp. I keep waffling between my goals and nutrition. I was obese as a kid, and by 14 became self-aware and lost 80 pounds and have stuck in this 15-pound range for the last 20 years. In the past year and a half, my eyes were open to bodybuilding, and I've been training since. I've been absorbing as much information as I can and making mistakes and learning from them. On one hand, I want to build as much muscle as possible for the health, mental, and aesthetic reasons, but I don't want to be a muscle fatty. On the other hand, I've spent my entire life looking at the soft body, and I want to get fat down to start from scratch, but I don't want to lose what muscle I've put on and end up skinny. So going back and forth, haven't really accomplished either goal to any great extent. Much respect for Team 3DMJ. Thank you, from Eric. If we haven't heard that story a million times, right, Jeff?
Oh man, I mean, that's everybody's dilemma at some point. I even do that still to this day. I'm like, oh man, I'm just don't like the way I'm looking. I want to cut down, and then like, no, if I cut down, then I'm gonna prevent myself from building more muscle. Yeah. But it sounds like this person, correct me if I'm wrong, they've been recently training about a year and a half, right?
Yeah. Past year and a half, his eyes were open to bodybuilding, has been training ever since. So he grew up pretty heavy and then lost a bunch of weight kind of in his adolescence, early adulthood. And then it's just been like kind of stuck. And now he's like, all right, I have a little bit of muscle, but I'm also softer than I want to be.
I mean, most people's goal for the most part is like, they want to put some size on, they want to put muscle on. Mm-hmm. So in this case, if you've only been really at it for like the last year and a half, there's still a lot of potential to probably improve that physique being away from a deficit. Mm-hmm. So it's hard because if you're not happy with the current look, then it can be frustrating, to the psyche. It's like you're not really seeing the results you want to see because obviously building muscle takes a lot more time. But I can just see if this person is patient for like, let's say another year and the training is really solid, they're probably going to make, some pretty good gains, and their physique's going to look a bit better in a year's time, even though let's say the body fat percentage is roughly the same. It's kind of like myself, like when I walk down the street in a t-shirt, like I'm sitting at probably like 18% body fat, but no one ever says anything like, hey, you look soft or anything like that. They're like, hey, you look jacked. It's just kind of my own perception. Like when I take my shirt off, I'm like, I don't really like the way this looks. But I also know that, more long term, when I do go to diet down, especially if I've really honed in on the training, it's really solid, then the end product's going to be a lot better because I've took more of the big picture approach. I've taken the long game. But I will say if this person is like truly unhappy with how they're looking, like it's just 24/7, then and from that perspective, then it's maybe not a bad idea to maybe diet down, lean down, don't spend too much time doing it to where, you're in a deficit for so long, then you're taking too much time away from the bigger picture of putting muscle on. But it might bring a little bit of happiness where maybe the anxieties and the stress is a little bit lessened, short term. And then from that point, if they've lost a few pounds, they can maybe start going in the other way, as far as putting muscle on again, but not letting yourself get back to the same body weight you're at now. So you got to stay a little bit leaner. So that would be my thoughts based off of the information that you mentioned, Andrea.
Yeah. And it's such a good point too, that, it's like you want to do two things. You could go really hard in either direction, but doing neither like gets you neither. Like you almost, most people can't just do like a couple 100 calories either way and hope for the best. It's like we kind of need to like decide. And I also really like that you mentioned that psychologically what someone is feeling and what they can handle, because I think obviously from working with you guys so long as coaches, it's like, well, physiologically, if you haven't been lifting like really intentionally for 5 years or more, like there's more potential, obviously, just like eat and grow, but that's not always where someone's like mentality is ready to go there. Like, why would we purposefully make someone more miserable? We always have to consider that.
There's other context to take into consideration too, because you don't really know this person's eating habits and, those types of things, how their daily flow is, their structure. So they might not even be in a position to really diet down, because it might create more issues than really what it's worth as far as like, let's say, a life outside the gym. So that's something to think about too.
Yeah. What you got, Bert?
Man, it's a long question, right? So we have to paraphrase it. And it's funny because even then it's not enough information, whenever I do a Skype with someone, we have them go through the, fill out an application. And I always tell them that, hey, maybe the first 30 minutes of this thing, you're going to be doing the majority of the talking, because had all these questions been asked there, obviously you can't be as dynamic on the application, right? But also, you would have been there all day just typing that thing up. So even though that was a lot of information, it's like, it's like we still want to know more. But based off what he had there, first of all, to lose 80 pounds and then to kind of hover within a 15-pound range, I don't know if that was comfortable. I would assume he's been able to do that rather comfortably, because you don't do that for 20 years. Like I know some people can, after, the average adult after a huge chunk of weight loss, mind you, he was younger, which there's some advantages to that, because, you can't, it's easier to teach a pup new tricks, basically. I just imagine that he has some good habits in place, because usually, people just, when they're suppressing all sorts of restriction that's too much and just not appropriate, eventually they blow up, right?
Right.
So the fact that he's done that tells me that, okay, like you have some pretty good habits in place, I imagine, because I can't see someone suffering for 20 years where they feel like they're walking on eggshells for that long. That's just, I've yet to hear that. So I'm going to assume that part, the fact that there's some good habits there. And I think since he discovered us and he's kind of been looking into the bodybuilding world, he's probably pretty deep into the weeds at this point. So, we've heard this from friends and family, because we're not immune to this, like even though we do this, it's like, they tell us what they're going to do, and we're supposed to co-sign off it. And, and often what they say is, well, I'm going to lose the weight first and then I'll start lifting weights. Yeah. And it's like, no, like you don't understand. It's like, you want muscle, especially without the assistance of drugs, it's not going to go in the direction that you think it's going to go, most likely. Yeah. So he's rather new to lifting weights, but he's pretty deep in the weeds. So he understands like the power of recomping via gaining muscle. That's what makes Jeff look, pretty good at 18% body fat, because most people, they think 18% body fat. It's probably not what someone like Jeff looks like. So I think in this case, would almost say it's like, hey, allow yourself to maybe gain 10 pounds along with, because that's not much. You're not going to be back at the 80 pounds that, I'm sure for this person is still the back of their mind that, I never want to be there again. Gain 10 pounds, get on a pretty sound progressive strength training program. And I think that's probably going to impact your physique a lot more than, I'd say, fat loss a year from now. Because, we know way too many people that, they've kind of been stuck in this position forever where they want to get rolling, but, they didn't have the leanest of baseline to start with. And because of that, nothing really ever gets done, like you said, Andrea. So 10 pounds is not much. I think that's a pretty good place for, I'd say, this case, and in most cases similar to this, and let that happen over the course of maybe not a year, because that's a pretty strict lean gaining phase. But, give yourself 6 to 8 months to gain 10 pounds and then see what that looks like. And if you like the way it looks, it's like, well, maybe keep going a bit longer, because it sounds like you have quite a bit of growth potential still left in that tank. And then it's like, hey, since, again, this person seems like they're pretty deep in the weeds, then you can maybe treat yourself to a fat loss phase. Because I think the difference between us and I guess because even when we're uncomfortable, it's like we know exactly how to induce fat loss. Whereas most of the people who are starting up January 1st, it's like they honestly don't know where to begin. Like this fat loss thing is like very mysterious and elusive when, I think I'll go out on a leg and say that this person probably knows how that works in regards to like, hey, you apply a caloric deficit and a high protein diet, keep lifting, and things will turn out pretty good. But yeah, it's just hard to do this with yourself. And that's why, man, like hiring a professional is so underrated. Right. It's something that as I've gotten better at what I do, like, I outsource now, it's like that plumbing fixture. It's like, okay, I think that's kind of out of my scope. I'll get someone in here to do that, So, or cleaning my gutters and nearly dying, which actually did happen.
But I mean, if you look at, like guys like yourself, Alberto, you look at Eric, Brad, myself, other bodybuilders that are pretty jacked. I mean, you're looking at them and majority of the time is not spent in a deficit. Like you could go across almost every jack bodybuilder and you ask the question, how much time have you spent in a surplus versus a deficit? And it's probably going to be greater in a surplus or at maintenance than it is a deficit. So with a year and a half of like training, like there's just so much potential if this person can just, commit himself to gaining, like you said. Whether if it's even 5 pounds, like even a 5 pound cell would be good because it puts the trajectory in the right, going in the right way. They're going to be in a good environment to be able to build that muscle. And when they do go to cut, like you said, there's going to be a better end product because now there's muscle there to go with it. Yeah. With that fat loss phase.
Yeah, and what cures like the feeling of just feeling a little soft is doing cool things in the weight room.
Yeah.
Like that's different because you don't need anyone to tell you, wow, that looks good. You feel it, it's very intimate in that sense. So yeah, usually whenever I'm feeling that way, like a few PRs later, I'm like, this is kind of worth it. I'm not totally mad at this suit I'm currently wearing.
Mm-hmm.
So would y'all say, I know there's zero absolutes. We don't do that. However, most of the time, in y'all's experience, would you say someone in their first 3 years, if the question, like he put here, like Eric said, bulk, cut, maintain, recomp, bulk sounds bad, but like gain, if it was gain, cut, maintain, recomp, it'd pretty much always be like gain would be the choice. And not like necessarily put on 5-10 pounds, but like just don't be hungry and focus on lifting.
Yeah. Well, a lot of times too, what people do is they'll gain, like let's say, because Albert said, hey, gain 10 pounds. Okay, I gained 10 pounds. Now I'm going to cut. It's like, no, you just got yourself in a prime position. Mm-hmm. Don't cut. Like stay in that environment a little while longer because that's where all your best gains are going to be at. It's right there.
Or they tried to get there too fast by eating a shit ton, and now you are a little fat because you didn't.
That's like getting on the freeway. Like all of a sudden you're getting off the freeway again. No, stay on the freeway. Go another 100 miles. Yeah.
Yeah, there's always that
So
time
yeah,
component.
generally that's what we end up doing.
Yeah.
But, you know, again, like I said, I'd be asking this person so many questions
Yeah.
that, again, shoot, it's one of those where I'm like, man, a Skype session with one of our coaches would definitely be worth it. You know, shameless plug, but it's true
I was
though.
just gonna say, like,
Because
it's hard not to just be
Yeah.
like, you should just fucking hire. Oh, sorry, you should just hire
Yeah.
us. But it's like,
Yeah,
but
'cause there's-
kind of
there's-
because that's
Yeah, there's literally probably like a good 20 questions that would be followed up after like getting this initial question. Like I'd be like asking,
and then you just
so
have
many
20 more questions after.
Yeah,
You know?
to
And if
really
you-
kind of.
sorry. Go ahead, Jeff.
I was just say it's just in order to really game plan, like to really set trajectory up in a good way. That's going to cater to this individual based off of his context, which is far more than what's listed in that question.
Yeah. And coming from, if y'all want to hear it from someone else who is very, like how you said, Bert, you're like, this is kind of a lot of information. I need y'all to know how crazy I am with like, the last time I applied for coaching, I think it took me like 3 hours to fill out my application at least. And it's like, as someone who thinks in paragraphs like this and who dances in circles mentally all the time, it's hard. If you've never been coached, it's hard to put a price tag on the mental, like the degree to which the chatter shuts off in your head and how much that frees up every other part of your life. So it's not, if you could think of it as like, oh, I'm not getting, like, I know enough about nutrition and training, like I can do it myself. It's like, that's not really what it's about. It's like just having someone to say like, here, do this. It's cool. I got you. Like, go live your life and relax. And like, not only could that relieve your stress just because like you don't want stress, but also that can do wonders for your physique, for yourself in the gym, for like, it trickles into like all these other things. So, and I know it's not cheap, you know, but even if you need like a buddy at the gym that you know has a little bit more sense to you, or like someone who's your equal to keep you accountable, but like just getting it out of your head can often be so much more valuable than just the money. It's like you can, when you have all this shit in your brain, like just to chill you out and get you on a road, right? Because right now you're on no roads because you have 4 routes that you're not taking any of them. So
Yeah.
I don't know if that helps.
Yep.
Okay. Did we do that one?
I think
Yeah?
we did it as well as we
think so.
could.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So, okay, this is from Tom. It was in an Instagram comment. So, like, from when we're recording this, like 3 days ago on the 3DMJ Instagram, we posted a quote from Eric, and it said, "The difference between a lot of good lifters and elite lifters is who gets hurt." And for further context, I'm going to read y'all the caption that says, "This is one of the many reasons we stress being accountable with your training volume calculations and emphasizing movement quality above the amount of weight being lifted today. The longer you stay healthy, the more work you can complete in any year, decade, and career. Only focusing on this session, this week, or this season can often kill your opportunities to achieve bigger goals in your athletic future." Thanks, mic drop from Mr. Holmes. And then Tom asks, in response to that, which we're gonna answer here on this show. He said, "How do you know when you should stop increasing your volume? And how much do you decrease that volume when deloading? Are there any rules of thumb?" So pretty much we made this big whole thing being like, yo, as long as you stay healthy, like you can go so much farther. And then Tom's like, but wait, like, how do I stay healthy? How do I know when I've done too much? How do I know when I need to deload? So like all the volume questions. Bert, we'll start with you. And the first question, how do you know when you should stop increasing your volume? Like I'm going good. Like, how do I know when I'm redlining it and about to injure myself and then being that person that does get hurt?
Well, I think, man, I'm at a road to all the things that can go wrong here. Because he solely spoke of volume, but there's other things like, hey, poor exercise technique.
Yeah.
Right? Like that can be one. You might not be using a whole lot of volume, but every rep looks not so good, different from the next. Right? So that's another way that people get hurt.
Good point.
Sometimes progressing too fast even, right? Which technically means, hey, what you're doing is right if Like it must mean that your volume's generally in the right place and that your technique is probably pretty good as well. But that can also happen where it's just like, hey, if you put together, I don't know, like 8 weeks of just like boom, 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 and then something snaps. So there's, I guess, many dimensions to staying healthy outside of just the amount of volume that you are using. However, volume is probably one of the, but yeah, it's probably the main culprit. But for sure, because to be realistic, there's not a whole lot of people that usually get themselves to the point that, the reason that they hurt is because everything's too good almost, and they, need to learn. Like it's a problem of the rich, I guess, right? But so here's the deal. I think if you, going back to I think especially, man, it's hard to get bodybuilders to like stop thinking about volume. But so for example, with Jeff, like especially as I've gotten older and I've been trying to undo a lot of the things that I've done to myself in my early 20s, like that's literally where all the things that hurt for the most part have come from. Like I understand, I think more than ever, why it might appear like he's using not a whole lot of volume, but in reality, he kind of sort of is. And that's because, his exercise selection's on point. His technique is on point. Like every rep literally looks the same. They might get slower towards the end, but every rep, like he is just so sharp with what it is that he's targeting. So yeah, I guess there's more ways, I guess, of increasing your volume outside of just increasing your volume. Like sometimes you need to do an inventory check when it comes to what it is that you're doing already, and there might be a better way to go about it. Like, I don't know, maybe said bodybuilder's 6'3" and he wants to squat, and it's like, bro, maybe for you, because you have a tiny little torso, these long old limbs, it's like that one kind of wears you out, and we get to the same place and something kind of goes snap, Yeah. Maybe a leg press or a Bulgarian split squat or a hack squat might be better for them. So yeah, I guess I'm going in circles because
it's a hard
generally
question
like
to answer.
There's so many things. Yeah. They go into staying healthy outside of just like, are you using too much volume? And quite often people use too much volume because, again, all those other things I mentioned are when it comes to especially exercise technique are out of whack. So it's like, no wonder when you went from, 10 sets per body part to like 20 sets per body part, you saw an increase in muscle mass. And it's because the work that you were doing with those 10 sets was just so ill-advised that you doubled it, you got away with it, and it's showing up in your physique.
You got a few more effective reps.
That's
the 10
all
extra
it was.
sets you did, we say maybe one of those is really good, is what's actually creating something.
Right.
But I think when I talk about volume, I think this person's asked, like, I think they're referencing to set volume.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. Not all sets are created equal.
Right.
No, they're not.
Like I can do a set, my 10 perfect reps. You look at someone else who has not as much experience. They do 10 reps. You're like, ooh, there's maybe 2 or 3 that were good, but they were in the beginning. Well, maybe the load isn't heavy enough in the beginning to actually even create enough stimulus. So it's not until towards the end of the set where you're actually getting a good stimulus, but because the reps are so terrible, it's really not good quality volume. So I think you always want to kind of like do a check, like basically do form checks on yourself, quality checks in a sense. Like if your form isn't really good, then the question is, do you really need to do X number of sets? Maybe not. It's like, hey, downsize that. Drop low down even, maybe. So temporarily you're lowering volume, but you're improving quality. Therefore, you're going to be able to move forward with better overall quality of volume.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people, they get confused, like I need to add more and more sets, but they're doing it ill-advised. So yes, use the general thumb of 10 to 20 sets per body part, but I mean, I've even heard Berto say this, maybe it's better to use less than 10 sets, maybe go 8, maybe 6. And just really hone on quality. You make 6 sets perfect and you recover from it. meaning the next day you're not all tore up, you're not beat up. There's no resentment to get back into the gym the next day. Like if you feel good, then you know you're recovered. Then it could keep going. But if you're feeling beat up, like, yeah, you feel tired, you have a little resentment towards going to the gym, then you have really no business adding set volume at that point, because you're just going to make yourself even more fatigued. So you're just basically you're going to compound that issue. And you also keep in mind too, like increasing volume is increasing load, increasing reps. So I would say set yourself up with a small baseline of volume, improve quality where it's perfect. Then from there, focus on performance. Increase the loads, increase the reps. When you start dying out, then you have to kind of ask yourself, why am I stalled out? Is it, if it's because of fatigue, again, it makes no sense to add volume. So maybe it's just as simple as like, okay, maybe I need to change my rep schemes up. Maybe I need to change how I'm progressing loads. Maybe I need to change exercises, things like that. Yeah. So there's a lot of checklists you can go through, but I don't think the go-to answer is always, I need to increase set volume. And I think that's where a lot of people go wrong, is because they're paying attention to what general guidelines are at, or what people are saying, hey, we need to increase X amount of volume every single week. Well, you got to go through those checklists first. The only time I'm going to do that is like I'm feeling fantastic and my form is just on point. And that's rarely not the case, because I don't know about you guys, but every single week, I'm not like always perfect. Fatigue does creep up, even with if my set volume is static. Like if my performance is elevating, it's inevitable. You're going to generate more fatigue as you go on. So that's where the deloads come into play and those types of things.
Yeah. And I think what's a really good point, or I guess Berto Lightweight mentioned it too, where the whole point of that post was like, hey, don't go too hard. Don't try to do all this crazy shit, because if you snap your shit up in a number of ways, that's what puts you backwards, right? And the immediate response, and Berto said, like, this is always the thing, is like, so they're talking about volume. And it's like, I mean, kinda, but like, not necessarily. Like it could be like, are you dieting too hard for too long? Are you trying to be a full-time student and a job and a bodybuilder? Are you, maybe your program is fucking fine, but you're just not waiting. Like you're not putting in the weeks, the same, like you said, the same sets, same rep scheme, whatever. And then just like run that shit until, a lot of people, I think, and I did this too, like when you're just getting to your intermediate stages and shit slows down, you're like, oh, I'm doing something wrong, I'm plateaued. And it's like, no, you're getting better. You're becoming a better athlete. You're becoming stronger. And it's just like a hard thing to wait for. So no, all good. Well,
sometimes I don't know about you guys. Sometimes I'll ignore what my body's kind of telling me. My body might be telling me in the moment, like, oh, this is heavy, but my ego is saying, no, don't wimp out. You got to push, because you need to make that progress. And then that's where you can get yourself into hot water. That's what I did when I tore my calf. Kind of just ignored what my body was kind of telling me. So
and that's a good point too, when it's like, I think the last question of the 3 that he asked was like, are there any rules of thumb or whatever? And I think like in the muscle and strength pyramids, like we have a flow chart.
That flow chart. Yeah.
Yeah. Cause it's not like, and this, like we have very, very broad volume recommendations, but within that, right, like Jeff said, like you just need to pick one. And then it's really not a rule beyond like, are you making progress? Do you feel like it's all based on your reaction and your progress and your feedback? There's not like a blanket rule afterwards. That's why it isn't a table. It's a flow chart of questions of like, do you feel like this? Do you feel like this? Is this happening? Blah, blah, blah. So,
and that would have been the easy answer. It's like, hey, check out that flow chart if we're talking about volume. But like we mentioned here, it's
like he went there. We didn't necessarily say that, but we appreciate that question, Tom, and we're not trying to like attack you or whatever.
Because most people, that's where they go.
It is.
So yeah. I mean, a lot of people were probably thinking in the same way. So it's
helpful
clearing that up.
I think too, like for me, it's easy for me in looking in hindsight, because obviously I got 35 years of training now. So it's like, oh, okay, I'm still here. I'm still pretty jacked. So I know I can make progress more than 5 years. But when you're young and you're just starting out, it's hard to pull back. Like you always want to do more because you're in a hurry to get there. But I would just encourage people, like, take a big step back and kind of just realize, like, if you're still within the first 10 years, you still have a lot more time afterwards. And there is such a thing as volume over time. So it's just like, from a mental perspective, sometimes just stepping back and kind of getting yourself away from like that short-term thought process as far as progress. That kind of helps me out a lot nowadays, especially with younger people that I coach. Just kind of get their anxieties brought down, because there's always a sense of urgency to make progress. I mean, we're bodybuilders. That's what we're supposed to do, right?
Yeah.
But it's not a short shelf life if you're a natural lifter. Like, it's a long road ahead.
Yeah, because like, what are you going to do? Add a set every 6 months, and then like in 10 years you're doing 50
that's
sets.
it.
You know, like there's not like hundreds of sets you're going to do.
No. But that's the thing. Like, let's say you did 3 sets, and over time, like every time, if your intensity is there, like let's say you're doing a set of 10 and you got 1 in the tank on your sets, you're going to get a stimulus whether you did 100 last week or it's 95 this week. If it feels the same, it's not like your muscle fiber is going to go, hey bro, last week it was 100, so you know what, I'm not going to come to the party this week because it's 95.
Yeah.
You're still pushing, you're still going to get a stimulus. And that's the thing with people, like, they just, it's more of the ego and the numbers kind of get in the way sometimes. And sometimes that can get you in the hot water, because maybe you're throwing like, hey, I did 100 last week, so I better put 105 on this week, even though your body's not capable of doing it, but you do it anyway. So that's where the form starts to break down. Then the question is, how effective were those reps? Because now you're asking leveraging, you're asking momentum to help you with the 5 extra pounds you put on there. So then again, it comes back to quality volume. You know, was it higher quality with a 105, or would have been better quality with 95?
Yeah.
You know, when it comes to training, it's just different from other things in life, especially for the ambitious bodybuilder, where, you know, if you tell someone you can like lose weight on more calories, less cardio, they're like, yeah. And if you told someone, hey, instead of working your 40 hours a week, you can make that money with 20, they're like, let's do it. But when it comes to training, you know, it's a little different, right? And personally, when I've seen, this is just the trend I've seen with athletes, is it usually like volume tends to kind of peak out like somewhere in the intermediate phase, but that's because there's a lot of garbage that's in there. And then by the time you get to the advanced phases, it's where it tightens up for a number of reasons. Like you mentioned one, Jeff, like that being strength, right? I'd say strength for sure. The other one is probably your technique just gets sharper, so you're able to, you know, create better stimulus. And then another one that I think sometimes is not looked at enough is just the ability to focus on what it is that you're doing. Like we've all had those study sessions that were supposedly 10 hours in a library where it's like, yeah, you weren't studying 10 hours because Facebook this, you know, check the IGs, the text messages. But then your focus is so different when like you are actually like, there's 2 hours, you know, like it's like, I need to get this in. It's like, that was actual like focus. And I mean, and not to like shit on anyone's like, I guess, focus, but I can easily say that my focus is better now than it was like 5 years ago, and then when it was 5 years before that. And it's just something that I get better at, just like turning it on like that. Like I don't have to psych myself up before lifts anymore, because it's like, it's so.
Well, I was gonna say too, like the anxiety around training, like because you're more advanced, you're not thinking about it too much now. It's like you get in there and you just know, hey, these sets are gonna go well. Like, so you're a lot more calm. There's a lot more poise. So you're just, like you said, there's just a lot more focus there. And in return, it's, again, better quality training. So the volume is like higher as far as the overall quality of it. So again, your 3 sets is
at the beginning. Like if I miss a workout, it's going. And it's like, oh, when you've done this long enough, like you realize, like you said, like you go on a vacation and you don't. Like I remember when I'd go on a vacation, like say I didn't train for 3 days and I would just feel like I lost my muscle, and it's like, oh no, you just do one good workout and like you're hard again. Like you're, I don't know. Everything was just so panicked for like the first 3 years where I'm like, it's all over. It's all gone.
Yes.
I'm so strong.
You know what frustrates me? It was like the seminar we did. I think it was the last one we did in Australia. And it was like the day before, and I'm like studying and trying to get it in my head. I'm trying to prepare and practice. And Eric's over there just chilling, like just chilling. I'm like, he's like, nah, I got this. I don't need to go through all that. I'm like, That's basically what happens with an inexperienced lifter. Like that's me, like all scatterbrained, and here's Eric, the advanced lifter. Like I got this
because he presents every day of his life. Yeah. Yeah.
That's why on my one of my journal entries, I gave people that challenge. It was a very minimal amount of sets. I don't recall, it was like 6 to 8. I'm like, commit to doing 6 to 8 for like just say 6 months, like per body part. And what this is going to have you do is just think differently about every single detail. And here's a catch. I think the majority of us can probably progress on like 6 to 8 reps, 6 to 8 sets a week.
Yeah.
I think it's a great cure-all to just have less things to manage, to really just focus on the quality of everything.
Yeah.
That's literally what got me out of, for a minute there, my crazy volume phase. I did a program like that, and it was just so different. It was just like nothing is wasted. Nothing is wasted. It's like I must make everything, as precise and well thought out, and don't resort to always adding more. Because prior to that, I was doing the Arnold workouts from the encyclopedia, which were legitimately, even with like minimal rest, those were like 3-hour workouts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To get to, let's see, the questions, like the first and the third are more related. Like, how do you know when you should stop increasing your volume? Are there any rules of thumb? We talked about that. But the middle question, he said, how much do you decrease that volume when deloading, just to kind of like move the episode along? If you Google 3DMJ deload, just those 2 words, we have like 5 blog posts like at the top of the Googles that'll tell you, like Brad did, like a why do we deload, and then a series of how do we deload. And then we had a guest post by Jason Bozak that was using deloads to set yourself up for success. Who did this one? The variables to a deload and taper. I'm going to assume it was Brad again. Let me see. Yeah.
I think it was.
So we have tons of stuff on the website that might be even more helpful than us talking about it, because Brad's very like numerical and like charty, and like he'll give you all the deets. So are we good with that one, gents? I think y'all did great.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I'm good.
Cool. Okay. Question number 3. Asim or Asim, I'm not sure, ASIM, asked us this on our case study Q&A question form that's on our website, which I'll talk about at the top of the show. We'll have already talked about at the top of the show. He asks, I have been cutting for the first time in my life, starting at 81 kg and now currently down to 75 kg, and I'm 170 centimeters tall, and I have been eating a flexible diet with good macro and micronutrient profiles. Basically, he's been crushing it as far as he's concerned for a while. But my question is, while cutting, I'm facing lots of, he says hair fall, but because of the measurements he used, I'm assuming English is not his first language, but hair loss is what I'm going to say. My question is, while cutting, I'm facing lots of hair loss. Am I missing something in my diet, or am I going to get bald? And immediately, this makes me think of a couple of stories that I know we've had a few athletes within the roster over the years that while prepping this has happened to. We can start with that, Bert. I know you've worked with one. I know we're not going to like name names or whatever, but you've experienced this. Elaborate, please.
Yeah. I have, and well, I guess we don't know how lean this person is, right?
Sure.
But it sounds like they're quite proud. But in order to get quite lean, I think for most people, you will get to the point where I guess the word malnutrition in some way, like to start, it's like you're not eating enough energy on a daily basis, and your energy stores are quite depleted as well. So especially like for contest prep athletes, it's one of those things where it's things you have to talk about, because we talk about the side effects all the time.
As a coach, you want to know.
Talk about.
Yeah, as a coach, if anything new happens, you'd want to know. Yeah,
and something that like you want your athletes to tell you if it does happen, but generally, like as to why we do see it happen with a contest prep. But again, these sort of hypocaloric environments impact people differently, so it can be for a bunch of different reasons as to like why it's happening, and it's certainly something that is out of my scope. And if I had something like that come up, is like I know exactly who I'd go to. I'd go to our guy Steve Steve the RD, who could probably better help this, because that's just not what I do. I get people in shape. So, and he'd probably recommend, okay, go see this person, that person. So it's common, it happens, right? But I couldn't tell you exactly why or where you're going to end up necessarily. That's definitely something you should, seek professional advice on.
Yeah, because just because we've seen it in preppers, like you said, it could be because of the nutrition component. It could be just the stress of prep, and it could be something entirely different, or it could just be like dudes lose their hair, and it might just be at the same time.
Yeah, it might just be in the cards,
another
right?
or another medical issue that is out of our scope of practice. Jeff has so much hair; he's going to weigh in on this right now with his big mane of locks.
Yeah, it's from all those preps I ran. I'm pretty sure. No, but yeah, on a serious note, no, I agree with you guys. I think it's beyond our scope of practice. It's always seek out professional help where they have, basically they'll be able to diagnose it where obviously we can't. And so it's hard for us to say, how to help this situation out.
Yeah, for sure. But it is a good question. And I know we get asked a lot of weird stuff, but for the listeners, it is like, we've all decided long ago, years ago, once we started with Steve, he's kind of our first, because it could be a nutrition thing, right? He's our first person. Obviously, if it's bodily things, that we'd go to Nick Licamelli, whose shirt I'm wearing, Strength Together. We have disordered eating behaviors. We immediately go to Amanda Rizzo, who's our mental health consultant. And then with things that could be clinical, we immediately ask Steve first. Yeah. And then he'll, like us, if he's Berto, did he want the athlete's protocol first, or was he immediately let's go to a medical doctor for a thorough exam?
I haven't had one since we brought Steve on board, and it was 2 occasions that I've just, and I've heard it a few times, but never to the point where it was concerning, I guess.
Okay.
It was just I'm noticing that it's usually women, and they're when I'm brushing my hair, there's just more there than usual. So, but no, I think if it got to the point where someone told me I'm kind of worried about this because I can kind of, see little differences here and there, then it'd be something that I'd talk to Steve about.
Yeah. So in short, talk to someone who's a professional in that field, starting with some type of doctor. Speaking of females, though, I've noticed when I was on one of my birth control pills back in the day, my hair seemed like it was thinner right here, and it hasn't happened since. It was just this one few month stint where I was like, am I losing my hair? And then we changed the pill because of I was also having breakouts, and then it fixed it. So it's something as simple as that too. So shit, you never know.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Especially not a prep coach. We really don't know. So, okay. But thank you for that question, Asim. This is from Brent on the Instagrams. He asks, how do you even begin to construct a posing routine? I have my music, but should it be my best poses? One from each angle? Some people dance or flip or pump up the crowd. Does it even matter? Wait. Some people dance or flip or pump up the crowd? ? Does it even matter if prejudging is worth more? So, best poser of the 3 of us would be Jeff. Tell us about posing routines.
By a hair, maybe.
It's true.
By my hair or your hair? No, my background in posing is because I've come from old school. Back in the day, the Mr. Fremont was one of my first shows, and the head judge there was Ed Corney, and of course he's famous for being one of the greatest posers back in that era. So that was a big part of that show. Was it was almost prestigious to actually pose well there. If you go there and you have a good routine, it's oh, that guy's awesome. So I put a lot of effort and energy into it. So for me, I put a heavy emphasis on it. I took pride in it. And of course, if you do a good job, not only you get, the oohs and ahs from the judges, but also from the audience too. So I just took a lot of pride in that. And that's kind of how I coach it. So like the way I see it too is like these promoters, like it takes a lot to promote a show. And I think a lot of us as bodybuilders, we don't really get that insights, that behind the scenes insight. There's a lot that goes into it for months of just planning. So yes, we're as bodybuilders, we're digging, we're grinding, we're training, we're dieting, but they're also grinding too in a different way. So to me, I like to say, okay, you know what? In order to help make their shows better, then I'm going to pose well on stage because people are coming to pay, buying a ticket costs money. So I'm going to put a little effort into it. So I think from that perspective, I mean, just have a sense of pride and you're presenting your hard work too. You're training for weeks on end. So you don't want to do a disservice and get up there and pose like crap, during your routine. So I think if your personality is one where you feel awkward, you're uncomfortable, you're not really coordinated, then you definitely want to plan ahead, like have something, on paper to kind of go off of. The way I kind of just set things up, like, okay, I'm practicing the mandatory poses anyway. I have to do those for prejudging. So I can just do those in my routine, start from the front, do the front double bicep, do a front lat spread. Let me transition to the side, do a side chest, side triceps, transition to the rear double bicep, rear lat spread, back to the other side and do the other side poses. And then back to the front. Hey, hit a most muscular, wave to the crowd and walk off. At least, it's simple, but at least you have some type of choreography to it and you're going in a circle. So the transitions aren't too bad. And you just want to pick music that's going to suit your personality and the audience can kind of relate to it. And I think if you do just enough, it's going to go over well. And if you smile, it shows you put some effort in there. But you don't want to be that guy or that gal that goes up there and you're just like deer in the headlights. It's obvious you don't know what you're doing. You're looking up at the ceiling. You're not smiling. You look nervous. I mean, to me, that just doesn't come across too well. And it's not really helping your cause out as far as putting on a good show. It's not helping the promoters out as well. So that's how I kind of see it. But I think it's just something simple. But if your personality is like, hey, I'm a free flower, I got coordination, I could dance, like just get up there and be creative then. You may not have to, plan in advance with it. But most shows, they don't judge it. Some will say they do. But I mean, if they do, it's like, it's minuscule. It's not like the best bodybuilder, if his posing routine is just absolutely horrendous, he's not going to lose to someone else, if he has that much over that person as far as like symmetry, conditioning, and muscularity. So my opinion is have fun with it, but at least be somewhat prepared for it and have fun with it.
Yeah. Is there like a minimum number? Because usually it's like what, a minute? Most of the time, most shows, it's like a minute.
Some shows are a minute. Some are even 30 seconds now because they're going more show formats. So they're going through it quick, trying to, because they only have so much time with the venue. So they're kind of just pushing people through. So you might only have 30 seconds. So like a minute, you might be able to get in maybe 10 poses comfortably.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask. Like how many?
30 seconds, maybe 5. But I would definitely recommend like doing your best shots. Like you don't want to get your body in poor positioning where it just doesn't display it too well. But yeah, do your favorite shots for sure.
Yeah. So like if I wanted to do bare minimum because I'm a nervous person and I have a 30-second thing, is it like one from each side? Do you think that's important? Like when you say do your best shots, do you think you need a back shot? You need a side, you need a front, at least one of each?
I think you could be creative. Like the way I see it, if it's not heavily judged, like if they say ahead of time, hey, this is going to be heavily judged, then yeah,
which I've never heard. Have you?
Exactly. It's more like your time to display your physique how you want. Like to me, that's your expression of your artwork in a sense. So if let's say your back is a weak point, don't do back shots.
Yeah.
Just do the front and sides. Do your strong sides. So
yeah, just
be creative with it. Have fun with it, and just think of it. That's your time, your hard work. That's your time to actually shine because you're going to be up there by yourself. So all attention is on you.
For sure. And if you want, I'm trying to think, like if I was actually doing the bodybuilding division, I would go to Instagram and just like because everyone, obviously, if they're listening to us, they follow at least a couple of y'all on Instagram and see anything beyond the symmetry poses that you like. Try them on, take photos. When you're, like you said, when you're posing, practicing anyway, just add in like 3 others that like.
Yeah. Like if I want to add in poses outside of the mandatories,
like if I wanted to do a little,
like the classic poses or whatever. Like I remember back in the day, I would like go on the internet and look up Frank Zane. I would look up like all these different bodybuilders and just look at all their poses, and then I would just experiment on myself and see if it looked good or not.
Yeah.
And if it did, and I liked it, and I rolled with it, I would incorporate it. So you'll probably notice a lot of my routines. I have some of the mandatory shots in there, but I also have some of the other classical type poses before classic physique was even a thing. I've been doing that since the early 90s.
Yes.
I'm old. Damn. Yeah.
No, you're not. Not old.
You're young old.
Yold. Bert,
Yold.
anything to add?
He's going to break
posing.
dance this time around. Yeah.
Just so y'all know, I don't know who wouldn't know this, but Eric has a full-on B-boy show.
Dance party. Yeah.
So that's a perfect example.
The New Zealand dance party. That should be his bodybuilding nickname.
So he's creative, right? He's just like, he just goes in the moment. Just
pop locking and drop in.
Yeah. And I'm the opposite. Yeah. Like, I can't do that. I can't
I'm
dance.
with you, Jeff.
I think I could dance. I just get embarrassed when I'm out there on the dance floor.
You can dance.
Go figure, right? My wife pulls me on the dance floor. I should like clam up, but get me on a posing stage with underwear. Hey, I'm comfortable. But I have to choreograph because I don't have dancing skills. So I'm like, all right, I have to choreograph and I have to practice. And the way I practice probably helps some people is like, if there's, let's say I have 10 poses I'm going to do, I order them on paper, 1 through 10. I start the music. I only hit the first 3 poses when I practice. And I do it over and over again until it's really, really smooth. Once I'm confident with that, then I add the 4th pose in. Then I just go 1 to 4 over and over. And I just keep doing that till I get through all 10. So by the time I get to the show, it's like automatic. Like I don't have to think
memory.
about it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I dislike the posing routine portion.
So does Brandon. So does my boyfriend. He has
yeah, and it's funny because he's kind of an artiste/performer at heart, right? And I love dancing. Like I've been left behind at clubs because the music is so nice, and I'm like, now y'all go. I'm gonna stay here and just lose myself. But when it comes to bodybuilding, it's like, okay, entertain us. Like that just doesn't come natural to me, you know? So, but what I've done is I've just kind of reframed it in my mind where it's like, okay, it's a time to get some really good shots.
Good photos.
So I think,
Yeah.
So I start with that. It's like, okay, so of course, like all my favorite poses, because those are going to make me feel comfortable because those are my best poses anyways. And maybe little oddball positions that maybe aren't part of, the mandatories, like little things. Yeah, stuff like that. Twisting
that one
poses.
picture that you captured in 2011 where it's the most muscular, the hands clasped, but your head is down. Like it looks artistic. Like you don't do that in the mandatories.
Yeah.
This one?
So it's for me, it's like it starts there. And then once you get comfortable with just the poses you're going to hit, not rushing them, because that is something that someone who doesn't necessarily enjoy that portion will often do. Once you get that down and how you're going to connect them in the same order that Jeff mentioned, from there, I'll just look at other guys that really enjoy that portion of it, like both new and old, and find like some cool ways to kind of connect those poses to like just add a little bit more to what's going on there. And with posing, honestly, like I think most folks who don't enjoy the routine portion of it, they wait till the last minute. And by last minute, I think 4 weeks is last minute to me.
Yeah.
With posing, a little bit goes, like a lot of things, a little bit goes a long way over the long haul. So start honestly from like week 1 and just, you'll see that by the end of it, you'll probably kind of even look forward to that because you've done it so many times and it's gone well so many times. And by the end of the prep, you look quite good. So it's kind of, it's easier to deal with maybe the portion of the show that you're not most excited about. But do it for the pictures because
that's a good point.
Sometimes mandatories don't capture everything you want it to capture.
Yeah. Can I tell you my favorite posing routine of all time?
Sure.
Like I would say now, was when my friend Larry Lawrence to go did his routine to the Rugrats theme song.
Oh,
I was crying. It made me so happy. And it was the Mayhem,
That
right? It was like
flowed
the
well.
biggest show we've ever been to and shit. And then the little chime, y'all know it if you're a 90s kid. It was so good.
Yeah.
My favorite
Shit like that
of
makes
all
me so
time,
happy. Yeah, tell me.
My favorite part is Sean Ray, 1994, Mr. Olympia.
Okay.
Like, yeah, it's really classic, but it's kind of a ballad, but it's powerful. It's pretty cool.
Okay.
Sean
Sean,
Ray was perfect,
S-E-A-N or
man.
S-H-A-W?
SHAWN.
Okay.
Sean Ray. Yeah.
He competed at 210, Jeff. He could have been.
Oh, shit.
Imagine him in the 212 class. Him in the 212 class today.
He would be Mr. Olympia 212.
He was up there with the beast and
Yeah.
just amazing bodybuilder. Yeah, I know exactly what routine you're talking about. Even someone like me, that pose and routine is inspiring.
I don't. I'll have to Google it. Bert, give me yours.
Ronnie Coleman when he came out as Moses. Actually, no, that is an example of what improvised looks like.
Posers. I love Ronnie Coleman, but it's posing, man. It's like, ooh, we could fix that. We could have made him even look crazier.
Like, I think the wig was like an off-color white, so it looked pink under the lights to begin with. And he spent most of it was weird. So he spent most of his time like raising the roof,
Yeah.
more so than posing. But
Was he chewing gum in that one? I can't.
He
remember.
might. He did often, but that's a good example of what not being prepared looks like. So we'll give them the Sean Ray, which someone like me that's not necessarily my favorite portion. That hypes me up, and then you have the Ronnie Coleman, which is like, okay, let that be a strong deterrent to you. Practice your routine.
This is what happens when you're not prepared. Yeah. Okay. Cool. All right. Okay, number 5 from Kinza. This was from our Q&A forum as well on the website. I've had a really long off season thanks to COVID and several surgeries to correct some nagging injuries. I'm at the healthiest point I've ever been with body image and mental health, but frustratingly not in the best physical shape. I know if I continue to be patient and kind, I'll come back stronger. How do you know when you're physically and aesthetically good enough to try for another competition season? Funny you should ask, because Alberto just released a whole ass course on this called Prep Positioning, where he goes into detail about what we think ready is, but I'll let him tell you now.
Yeah.
Ready to go.
Well, I think with this guy, seems like he's been doing it for a while.
Or female.
Gal.
Let me
Yeah.
look that up.
Yeah. So they've been doing this for a while, it sounds like. But then again, I can't be too sure. So, again, we don't know. But so there's two ways of looking at this. Personally, I like 3 years. What was that?
2 seconds. I just want you to know I looked it up, and Kinza is a female who's currently 122 pounds, which is plus or minus 15 to 20 pounds from stage weight in bikini.
Okay. Excellent.
So there's that. Okay.
So they've competed before from the sound of it, right? Okay. Well, I mean, it seems like they have their base in check already, or had it at some point, and it's kind of not in the best place right now.
Yeah.
So, and I'm just going to go out on a limb and say that they're probably still at a place where they can see a good amount of improvement. So I don't. This individual isn't like in their 40s, 50s, 60s, or anything like that.
No,
right?
30. Yeah, she's 30.
Okay. Man, I guess I've always thought of like when is the right time to compete. Is when I'm like just so excited to like show what it is that I got. Like there is no doubt in my mind, and I'm like I just can't wait to absolutely leave my last physique behind. So in this case, it sounds like they're a ways from even their old baselines, but I think a lot of us during this pandemic have learned that, hey, it comes back rather quick.
Yeah.
I think I was maybe 80% of my 100 from the start of the pandemic to the end of the lockdown here. And man, within like 2 weeks, I'm like, oh, okay, there it goes. And maybe it's not that accelerated for everyone, but generally speaking, it catches everyone off guard in regards to like how quickly it comes back. So I think old baselines, your body's quite good at making those old adaptations happen again, right? Like the road's already paved for that. But I wouldn't compete, because that old cliche, the stage is always going to be there. And it is true, right? Almost always, because 2020 kind of showed us otherwise, right?
Right. The one time it wasn't there.
But yeah, I think when it gets to the point where you're like, man, like I am just excited to show the next version of myself off. I think that's when you go for it, when there's like no doubt in your mind that you're just better. I think that pertains a little bit more to their specific situation.
Good point. Yeah, because it's not like I'm an athlete here seeking coaching and like, what are the numerical blah, blah, blah. She's just like, is there kind of like a good enough? And I think that does cover it, because at the end of the day, everyone's doing it for themselves, right? And if you don't feel like, obviously it's not now, right? If you don't feel, you're like, hey, I kind of feel like I look like shit. Well, obviously you're not going to prep now. But I think you mentioned it in one of your other posts too, Bert, like somewhere on Instagram, where you're like, when I look at the last time I competed and I think like, what a chump. Not that you should think that you're a chump, but like when you're like, I know that I got something on that one. Whatever that is to you.
There's no doubt in your mind. I think sometimes people, because life doesn't always go according to plan, and they're like, my off season has to be 1 year, 2 year, something like that, and they're like, I guess it's time to prep now, and it's like, no, you not necessarily. Kind of work your butt off and kind of let it come to you, and when it's right, like you'll absolutely know, because you'll be getting antsy about doing it again.
Yeah, like when you can't not do it.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jeff.
I was just saying, it sounds like for this person, they're physically, like their physique isn't there. So they're actually behind. So I don't know about you guys, but whenever my performance is at its highest, like we're at the ceiling, my physique looks the part. So it's kind of like when I tore my calf back in 2013, because I had plans to compete. And I was like, okay, I got to rehab this. So it took me about 9 to 11 weeks to get it fully recovered. And I knew, okay, now I'm recovered, but now I'm going to need extra time now to get my lifts back up, to get things right physically. So I spent another 4 or 5 months, 6 months, I think, just getting like all my lower body lifts back up to speed. And once it was, I was like, okay, there's my legs. Like everything looks like it's supposed to. Now I'm like physically okay to jump back into a deficit. Like obviously if you're physically not there, if you're lacking muscle or there's aches and pains, jumping into a deficit is not going to bring that muscle back. Or it's going to make those aches and pains possibly even worse, or just hard to clear out. So I think it's like get the physical part right. Like make sure aesthetically, like you got that muscle fullness back, the aches and pains are really diminished or non-existent. You got your head on straight, life's good. You're like, okay, now I can actually start this prep. So I've had a couple of situations just personally where I've had to kind of delay prep starts in order to kind of get all those things kind of lined up more or less in a good place.
Right. And she asked, like, how do you know when you're physically and aesthetically good enough? And it sounds like you're saying, like, if you just focus on physically, the rest will kind of fall in line.
Yeah, if your performance is elevated.
Yeah, if you worry about aesthetically first, you might not physically get where you need to be in terms of your performance or healing or whatever.
Yeah, so for me personally, it's like, okay, I knew once I got my squats back closer to 4 plates, well, obviously if you're lifting 4 plates, I mean, the legs are going to represent that. There's a difference between squatting 315 and a difference between squatting 405. If you're regularly squatting 405, I can almost guarantee your legs are going to look better at 405 than 315.
That makes so much sense.
So it's like for me, like I use the performance as the marker. Like if I'm performing as like really well as an athlete, okay, that means I'm like thriving. Like food is good, recovery is good, everything's good. Okay, now I'm in a better position to actually put myself into a deficit. But otherwise, you're just kind of, it's like an uphill battle.
Yeah.
And your end product, like you're probably going to have, like for me, if I would have, let's say I would have prepped, without really kind of working my lifts up first, chances are my legs probably wouldn't have looked apart once I got dialed all the way in, I probably had like legs a little bit under as far as size.
Good points. Let's say that stepping away from Kinza and just the situation in general, like if someone is at there, like I feel great, I'm lifting good, blah, blah, blah. I'm thinking about like what are the checkpoints, coach? Like, okay, I feel good. I'm as strong as I've ever been, whoever this this imaginary person is. Then how do I know if I'm ready to prep?
How many years have you been training?
Okay, what's the minimum you guys got?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of context, because you could have someone that's been training for 2 years, but they're just genetically gifted and they got a ton of muscle. And you could have
we have seen that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you kind of have to assess each person, like where their muscle development is, what their habits are like, how much food they've been eating. Just like you kind of look at the history leading up to where they're at currently, and if it makes sense or not to actually put them in a deficit for a prep or not. So if they're well muscled, they're eating right, they're healthy, no aches and pains, life is good, low stress, then it's like, okay, it's go time. We can probably make it happen. But if they're physically, like, they're just not where they need to be, then it might be worth like, hey, let's take another year and let's focus on putting some muscle on and maybe working on habits and things like that. And kind of like Berto's course, right? Get him in a better position to actually start a prep.
Yeah, I agree. Like some people, shoot, our good friend in SEMA, probably year 1 into training, like he was probably fine. Realistically, probably 6 months once he stopped playing soccer. He was probably good to go. But yeah, generally speaking, I think you just need 3 years of like doing everything, not 100% right, but have your basic stuff in order for a good 3 years. And for most people, honestly, like it doesn't work out that way. Or like right out the gates, you were doing things right. So you might have been a gym rat for 5 years, but you have 3 years like that. You finally broke that point where it's like, yeah, you did things right.
You know how to track your food. You know what it feels like to be hungry. You
know how to lift.
Right. Your lifts are actually good.
Right. So yeah, generally speaking, you just want good 3 years of solid training. And for most people, I mean, it's not going to be your top physique by any means, but it's just a good place to start and see if you like this, to be quite honest.
Yeah.
You might be okay with just being a gym rat.
Yeah. Also, today, as we're recording this, we also on the YouTube channel just released like Berto going over like his requirements for like an intermediate athlete. Just like a quick little rundown of that. So those will be in the show notes.
Hey.
Okay.
Well, you know what? One last thing that she mentioned, I think this is really important, and it's often overlooked, but really important, is just the mental health aspect. I think just for everyone is, I've always made my best progress when like that's in order,
Yeah.
And I think anyone who's been training long enough, they scan back through the years, are like, yeah, I can see how that had a good impact. So first of all, just congratulations for getting that in order. It's going to really pay off and probably expedite you getting back to your old baselines. So yeah, for any of you guys out there who are kind of spurting in that department, it's definitely something, worth getting help on if need be.
Great point.
Because it impacts things severely.
Yeah. And again, we have Amanda Rizzo as our consultant. You can find on our website who has experience working with physique athletes, if that is something you're into.
Our three-headed monster. It's like the 3 really important things outside of what we can do for an athlete. Like that's why they're there. The
specialists. And we have like articles about like how we work with them and stuff too. Okay. 2 more. Can we do 2 more? We all dying? We okay?
No, we're good. We're good.
Everybody's good.
I've actually, I took
still
this.
have a little bit of hair left. We're good.
A little bit. Oh shit!
I'm about to ruin my REM sleep cycles for our listeners. Like, that's it's what is it? 7:46 p.m. So
okay, all right. This one's for the coaches. So this question is for the coaches. Here we go. From a coach for you coaches. How do you learn to peak people? We don't have a name for this one. It's just a homie of ours. Okay. How do you learn to peak people without messing them up? I've been a personal trainer and a coach for a very long time, and I feel confident getting people into shape. But now that I'm trying to get into actual bodybuilding contest prep coaching, the stakes feel so much higher, and I don't want to ruin anyone's big day that they've worked so hard for. On the flip side, I know it takes trial and error to learn anything. It's just that the cost of error seems so high with this new career path. Any advice would be appreciated. Hit us off, Jeff. Advice for new coaches.
Be honest. It's like, because, when you get someone new that you're starting with, you don't know their body, they don't know their body. Obviously that's why they're hiring a coach, but you also don't know their body up front either. And I basically just say, hey, we're going to do the best we can, but if there's no guarantees, we're going to, nail down, your first peak, if this is a first time athlete, it's like you said, he mentioned trial and error. It's going to be a lot of that. I just had an athlete where we did 3 shows back to back to back. The first show, I messed up the peak. I basically overfed him a little too much, and also a combination of little errors on his part. But it was kind of like, as a team, we both made errors, and we were both okay with that because, of course, there was transparency and honesty with everything leading up to it. So we had, thankfully, another show the following week. We got a little bit better, but we didn't nail it down. But on the third show, we nailed it. Like we basically hit the nail on the head. He peaked it really well. And it was a good feeling. But I mean, as a coach, the first peak, I just told him, hey, this one's on me. I just, we overdid the carbs and spilled them over. And he was okay with it. I mean, he probably wasn't okay with the fact that we didn't hit the peak, but he was, in a sense, he was okay with the fact that, hey, coaches, can make mistakes too.
Yeah.
But I mean, how else are we going to learn as coaches if we don't have opportunity to actually run trial and error? So, I think oftentimes, people look at coaches like sometimes being perfect, or we know a lot more than the athlete, which is, for the most part true, but still, it's like we don't know everything ahead of time. Like, we can theorize, kind of game plan, and we just have to run it and see and make adjustments thereafter. Now, I'll say if all 3 peaks went terrible and it's on me, then that's a problem.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, you just have to be honest with athletes and just know, hey, this is how I think it's gonna go, but we have to run it. And if it doesn't, then we got communicate together and brainstorm. Because that was what I did after. It's like, okay, what exactly did you eat? What did you do? I needed to know exactly on his end what was going on, and then that way I can basically troubleshoot and try to adjust my protocols. So hopefully that helps. My brain's kind of stopped there. I'm sure Berto will throw some things in there.
No, I thought it was a natural stopping point. I wouldn't have thought your brain just shut off.
RPE 10.
Yeah, there's too much intensity, bro. I need about 2 minutes to let my brain kind of rest up.
Period,
and I'll come back for another good quality set after.
Tell me, Bert.
I'd say at most peak weeks, like the reason most people wreck them is because they try to change too many things and push things too hard in one direction or the other. So let's just say like the default guarantee that your athlete's going to look good is like, hey, like 5 to 7 days outside of the show, just get them on maintenance, steady sodium intake, maybe a little bit more water than usual. And I think they'll most likely look as good as like most days, So just consider that like your launching point, right? Like if you did that, they'll probably be fine,
Yeah.
But from there, it's like you can kind of move things a little bit. It's like, hey, let me pull the carb switch up a little bit, or dial rather, and we'll do it on this day or that day. So yeah, I think as time goes on, in regards to your experience as a coach and your experience with like said athlete, you can probably get a little bit more risque with it. But I think the more conservative you are, probably the better off you're going to be at first. But I guess, for someone who wants to do a little bit more than just that, that's where I think having refeeds over the course of your contest prep, especially say the last half, is important, because it's like you get to see what this person looks like when they fill out, and then how long it takes for them to sharpen up maybe a little bit, or maybe they don't lose sharpness at all. But again, these are all notes for you to, basically take notes from and be able to apply to the peak week. So again, people get in trouble because they do things they haven't done at all over the course of the contest prep. So it's not like you're doing anything if you're doing that. So there's going to be a lot of clues in basically everything that led up to the peak week. And taking that information, you can apply to what I said in regards to like the, hey, almost risk-free way of doing it. And just stay a bit on the conservative side at first, and that's why you want to do multiple shows with an athlete so that you can tighten that up as you go. But as Jeff said, it's like, I think very early on you need to set up the premise that I am not perfect. Like, I'm going to be learning things as I go as well. And I will mess up sometimes, just like if you mess up and, a few extra cookies make it onto our plate, like I want you to tell me, and I'm going to do the exact same thing as well on my end. And I think that just creates a more relaxed environment for both parties, and your athletes learn from you. So if you are, transparent in regards to like, that last adjustment probably wasn't warranted or too assertive, or we should have made an adjustment here, they'll learn to be more transparent and trusting with what's going on their side of the partnership. So, but again, like, it's a subjective sport. Use that to your advantage, because what looks good that's all you're really trying to do. So like, don't overload yourself too much with, getting too analytical with it. Like, just monitor the athlete closer as we get closer to the stage, and what looks good is their best is what you're going to aim for. And I think when you put a little bit more art into it, it's a little bit more relaxing, than like this science experiment that has to go 100% well every time. So
yeah, and the fact that you like feel this pressure means like you care.
Yeah,
so that's important. Cool. That's good. Yeah. That's not.
That's really good,
it's better than being so sure that you got this shit or whatever. But I know when I was it 2015 or when I first started coaching with 3D, that first year, I also didn't feel super confident at first, or it's like I felt confident in my head knowledge and like, okay, these are what we recommend, these numbers, this type of thing or whatever. But whenever, when it came down to it, it was like, okay, 8 to 4 weeks out when we have our 2-day refeed, like literally telling this person, hey, we're going to practice. If this is what we did, like say this next 2-day refeed, I want you to send me photos of this day and the next 3 days. And that might tell us when we should eat more leading into the show. That is 4 to 8 weeks from now. And they're like your little buddy in this. And they can also tell you like, yeah, I have these pictures and I think these 2 photos are like, I think this was the best look. What do you think? And if they disagree, go with them or not, or like make your case, whatever. But, knowing like me and my little teammate ran this test together and we agreed that this seems like a sensible thing. Then if it goes good or bad, like Jeff said, like, but we decided on this plan and now we know. And so that was really helpful for me anyways.
I remember when I first started coaching people, I remember I was like, oh man, I don't want to mess people up.
It's scary.
I telling myself that. Yeah. And I said, okay, I think I took on two athletes. That was it. Didn't overload myself at all and just did 2, got confidence with it. Once I knew they were okay, I'm like, okay, I can maybe do a couple more on top of that. So just over time, I started to develop some skills and able to manage time well on my side of things and just really put an emphasis on the communication side of things.
Yeah.
Because it's hard to go wrong when you have a good amount of communication on both ends. Like things can go wrong, obviously, but I mean, as far as like when things do go wrong, you have that communication to kind of help things along, to make improvements. So, could you imagine like if we didn't communicate, we jack someone up, and they might not be open enough to say, "Hey, we messed up here." It's like, how can I fix anything if there's no communication?
Yeah. And sometimes you can do the exact plan y'all agreed on and no one messed up, but it just doesn't work out anyways. Like the last season I did with Berto, we thought it was fine, but then I found out when I get nervous, I can't poop. And then I was hella bloated, and then we tried to drink coffee, but it wouldn't go anywhere. So now I'm water bloated too. And it was like this whole thing. And like, who knew, and like no one did anything wrong. It's just like, oh, you're just a stressed out competitor. And so I don't know what we're gonna do about this, but
yeah, I was seeing that because I've done things like Berto just mentioned, like keep things really conservative. Nothing changes. Just keep doing the same thing. Okay, you're looking good now, so there's no reason why you won't keep looking the same as we keep, heading into the show. Day before the show, you're like, what happened?
Yeah.
Like you just look like a spilt mess, and it's like sometimes you just chalk it up, just like person's a stress ball. Day before a show, they're super stressed. Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Like, doesn't Eric when he flies, or doesn't something happen to Eric if he travels for a show?
His edema. Yeah. So
like he swells up too.
And you have to learn that, right? It's like, let me get there a few days ahead of time to, clear that up. Mm-hmm. But yeah, no, you learn as you go. That's for sure.
So I think that I find that oddly comforting. Like even if you had a show in your hometown and it went well, and like, so now we know this is how you peak. And then like, but now you have to fly for one, and the same exact plan could just turn to shit for no reason. And oops. Okay.
Yeah. But I think it comes down to the beginning. Like I said, like just saying, hey, just like you as an athlete, you're not perfect. Me as a coach, I'm not perfect, but together we're going to do the best we can. Open, honest communication the whole way. Of course, we're going to game plan, have structure and all that. And we'll just do the best we can as we go. And we're going to learn as we go too. Yeah. Because like I said, first peak I did with the gentleman didn't go well. Second one was improved, but all the way there. Third one, it was like, okay, we know what we're doing now. Like we got this on lock. So now in the future, because the season's over now, but we head into another season, you kind of know more or less how this person operates now.
Which is why we love multi-season, multi-year career coaching. Because imagine starting that shit over with if he, obviously we welcome if you want another coach, but like, it's just when you work with the same coach, multiple seasons, y'all just get better and better together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Good talk, y'all. Last one coming up. Here we go. This is from Dan. My son is only 12 years old and is very into bodybuilding and fitness. He's constantly watching people on YouTube and TikTok and flexing and taking photos and the whole 9 yards. Should I be worried about it? I know if he was obsessed with baseball or football, it'd be quite normal and easy to encourage. But since I know this sport can be pretty brutal and he already cares so much about how he looks and eats, I'm not sure whether to keep encouraging him or just let it ride out and fade out. I used to compete in my 20s and 30s, and we have always worked out in the garage together since he was little, kind of like Jeff and his son. Past year or so, his focus has just grown so much, and I'd love to hear the coaches discuss this if they can.
What's the word you used once, Andrea, phrase, social media? What is it?
Literacy.
Literacy.
Yeah.
I think this goes for everything. I think you just need to, especially nowadays, teach your children. It's a skill that especially nowadays. I compare bodybuilding now to like just 10 years ago. Talk about a sport that was it was a really good fit, and for both good and not so good reasons at times. So, because I could see this even with, I don't know, if he was playing football, right? Like if you look at the Max Prep Instagram page, it's all these like freak house athletes. It's like this child that like looks like he's like 29 just running over these kids, and it's like, it's not always like that, like those are weird outlier situations and hey, let's focus on making the team this year and you getting better and keeping a lot of your bodybuilding, I guess, more on the intrinsic side of things, because it can be very easy to lose yourself in fitness, social media. So I think, and not just when it comes to that, I mean, when it comes to even the political environment, I think it's worth having these sort of discussions with your kids in general, because we're just bombarded with so much stimuli and information from every which direction, and you have to learn how to protect yourself against that. So I think just outside of just bodybuilding is something to keep in mind. Very different from how we were all brought up, like MySpace was a was a huge freaking wow. Like to me, it's like, wow, I can finally upload bodybuilding pictures. Like, I need this little platform, and it was little relative to what we have now. So, so I guess I'd start there, where, it's just something, just another layer to, let's just complicate parenting even more so now, because of like these electronic devices that we
have fun with that, Jeff.
all carry.
I know. I'm like thinking, how would I even approach this? Because Ethan's only 8, so he's not at that point where he wants to get in there and lift weights yet. Like,
he just hangs out in there with you, right?
He doesn't really do that too much anymore. It's kind of like, oh, Dad's in there working out. It's not a big deal anymore. But it's just, I think if I was to teach it to him, it would be more like what Alberto's kind of talking about. Like, it would, like, hey, this is like, bodybuilding weight training is good for like confidence, and you can help with your karate and things like that. But I would try to steer him away from the vanity part of it.
How do you now, though? He has a phone, and now he knows how to lift.
Expose him to it, but educate him on it. You have to actually I probably have to sit down and educate him on social media, like the pros, the cons, and just educate him. Because I think, with anything else that I've educated him on, he has a good filter. He has a good sense of like what's kind of good and what's kind of bad. But if I'm going to say, hey, let me keep you away from the social media bodybuilding side of things, like actually deter it. Like, you tell a kid no, it's going to intrigue him that much more.
It's like sex, right? It's like you have to have these discussions.
Because so
it exists.
Like, you can't have these Oreos, Ethan. Like, no, you can't eat those. And they're in the closet the whole time. It's like, at some point he's going to go in there and not just eat one. He's going to eat the whole box. So I think, I'm just going to have to get to a point where I'm going to have to educate him. Pros, cons.
Yeah.
Because go ahead.
No, you go. You're the dad. You go.
I was just saying, there's pros and cons to anything in life. So it comes down to education, like what I teach him. So, but I think if I try to just, like I said, if I just say, hey, no, bodybuilding's bad. You're 12. It's bad. Don't go on the internet. That type of thing. Like, that's not going to probably work out.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like this guy, like you said, he used to compete and he lifts in his garage like you. So he sees like, okay, there's that. And like, let's say let's say Ethan comes up to you in a couple years and was like, Dad, teach me how to do this, right? Then he gets a little buff, and then he goes and like the girls notice or the guys notice. And then he's like, oh shit, maybe this is my thing. And he starts doing it. And like, honestly, your story's a little similar, plus 5 years, right? You were the strong kid, and like becomes this thing that you're really proud of. You just didn't have a phone to post it with, but like you had a similar situation. And I wouldn't say that was unhealthy, but like I said, you didn't have the phone. You just got to impress your friends at school. I don't know. It's so complicated. Oh my God.
Yeah. I think I had the likes, but it was just like a small circle because you didn't have the internet back then. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I did have the ego. Like, everybody kind of looked at me as the buff 16, 17-year-old with a mustache,
Can't forget
so
that.
It's probably thicker than C-bums, at 17. But I mean, I had an ego, but I also had parents that kind of taught me well as far as like right and from wrong. So I knew probably not to cross over certain boundaries. Like, I kind of stayed in my own lane in certain things, but I did have that ego, kind of the attitude, hey, I'm cool, that type of thing. I'm just glad social media wasn't around, because I probably would have posted some dumb stuff, or whatever, and made myself look bad.
Yeah, but
I mean, what teenager doesn't do that though?
That's what I was going to say.
There's always stuff you can look back on.
It's a generational thing.
What did I
well,
do?
yeah.
Why did I do that?
Not even generational, just that, but like, okay, I don't know about y'all, but starting at like I grew up in gymnastics. I know it's not bodybuilding, right? But I was obsessed by a sport at like 6 or 7. By like 8 or 9, I'm training 20 hours a week. And it's, like you can't, like it was me and all my friends who were in my level. Like this is very common in gymnastics and competitive gymnastics that by the age of 8, 9, 10, you go for 4 hours after school every day. It's like what we all did. And because that's expected in that community, no one's like, oh my God, you're obsessed. It's like, oh, well, this is what gymnasts do, right? Whereas like, let's just say this kid is training 2 hours a day, but he posts on the internet and he's on his phone. And so people might be like, oh, well, this kid's upset. Well, it's like, what are we calling obsessed? Is it really bad? Because I know that was a huge asset to my life. I still, it shaped me in a lot of ways that I would consider mostly positive. And I know a lot of kids go through that with I was obsessed with this fucking frog from Sanrio Surprises. I was obsessed with Hanson, the the group. Like kids just have things, right? Like adolescents have things that are very important to them. And it just so happens that when this is important to you, and not that this happens to everybody, but like it just comes with a lot of like eating disorders and being naked on the internet a lot, and
that's where the education comes in, though, right?
Yeah.
So this gentleman's been in the sport, so he knows probably the goods and the bads, obviously. So he'll be able to educate them. So look at it this way: like bodybuilding is actually something that can be positive.
Yeah.
Whereas like I've seen, like when I was in high school, I've seen some of my friends doing stuff that they probably shouldn't have been doing. So I could say me going into the gym every day was kind of a good thing because it kept me away from some of the other things that probably would have got myself into hot water.
Yeah. And we've had very young athletes on our rosters. Like we've had 15 to 20-year-olds, at least a couple a year, right? At 3DMJ. Yeah. And some of them were like, oh, we're so glad we got to do this with you because look at what a great start you have. And this seems very positive. We've also had some of the young kids where it's like, oh, like we did this because it's better than you doing it by yourself. But like, oh, it'd have been great if you waited a few years. We always get parental consent for the listeners, just so you know. Like if they're under 18, we get parental consent to work with them. But I guess what I'm trying to say is like like you said, there's sides to everything, and we've seen both sides of everything. It's really enriched people's lives. It's also, caused issues. But as someone who had a lot of issues with bodybuilding myself, I know that I'm glad I went through it. I'm on the other side of it, and it really sucked. But I do feel like I'm a better person because of all that shit I went through. I don't know. Berto, you go ahead. You were going to say something.
No, what Jeff said, that I think, education is power when it comes to all these like pop culture groups that we see. Like when you really break things apart and like see all the pieces, I don't think it necessarily takes away the magic from it, but it definitely you will be less likely to be drawn into like the shiny parts of anything that aren't necessarily good for you. And I think, one thing that this person has, as an advantage here is that they know quite a bit, but also I understand how like sometimes, the more you tell your soon to be teenager like this and that, the less they're going to listen. So honestly, from that perspective, when it comes to what I do in his shoes, easy for me to say is like I'd be like, oh wow, like look at what Stu Phillips just put out,
like send him like the people that have like sensible heads on their shoulders.
It's like, oh, this Kramer dude's a freaking whiz, Krieger, things like that where they're like, okay, and then eventually they kind of discover these good influences on their own. But there's a risk to everything, right? Yeah. I think high school football, right? I think we look at it quite differently now relative to a few years ago, right? Just the more you learn about anything, the more you dive into a few layers, and it sounds like this kid loves it. just the harder it is going to be for you to be duped or fall into any of those negative traps. And personally speaking, maybe he'll find some relief in this. I think these kids are just getting smarter. The vast majority of them relative to what I know my generation grew up with. So it's a little bit easier to stumble upon into like good information and good influences a lot more than ever before. So that's one of the positives to social media.
Yeah. All right. So when are you going to teach Ethan how to lift, Jeff?
When he asks.
Okay.
Yeah. If he asks now, I'd be like, okay, yeah, we're only 8. Let's focus on karate for now. Yeah. But I mean, if he came at me at 12 and said, hey, Dad, teach me how to lift weights, I'll probably teach him 12.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean he has to train like gung-ho hard and heavy, but, teach him some technique and form. I mean, if anything, look at the structure involved in bodybuilding. Structure, you have to have work ethic, discipline. I mean, there's a lot that transcends to the real world. So there's a lot of positive. If it's like anything, if it's taught right.
Yeah.
So education, in my opinion, is like, don't try to, like, this is the way I kind of parent. Like, don't try to keep them from everything or shelter them, because obviously it can go bad. Like, hey, I'm gonna go eat the whole box of Oreos because you don't want me to have an Oreo.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, okay then. That we had a discussion. Yeah, thankfully he didn't say, "Do you have answers?" He said, "I'd love to hear your discussion." I think that was good, y'all.
Yeah, cool. Yeah.
And that was our last question. You did it all.
Nice, because I just enough volume right there where I'll be able to recover from it.
Yeah. Because that is the metric for all things in life, is the volume. So, thank you, Jeff Alberts and Alberto Nunez. And thank you, the listeners. This is 190 episodes. Next time I'm on this thing, it'll be 200, and I don't know what we're going to do.
Whoa.
I don't know what we're going to do. Maybe all of us do posing routines.
That's it. That'll be the whole podcast.
On the Skype, yes. And then I'll commentate so the listeners know what's happening. I'll tell them what poses you're doing during it and what you're wearing and what your face looks like.
Give us critique too. Yeah.
Yeah. Sounds good. Okay, well, I look forward to it, guys. Thanks for talking. And thank you, listeners, for another episode of the 3DMJ podcast. And we will see y'all next time.